It's going to restore
Really?
that
Where's
field.
Where?
If you go down here and make a right at the bottom of the hill
Yeah.
and make a quick left,
Yeah.
it's back
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You drive straight ahead.
Well, good morning, everybody.
Morning,
Let's, let's begin with a word of prayer.
I have a prayer request.
Yes.
I'm having cataract surgery and those lenses put in next Tuesday.
Okay.
And I've always been nervous about any kind of operation on my eye.
Sure.
So actually, I need prayers for peace.
Yeah, absolutely. I will include that today. Lord God, Heavenly Father, thank you for bringing us together this day. We pray for those who mourn the deaths of loved ones, the Bushenke family who are here today, and then all those who have lost loved ones. Lord, give us a comfort and a peace that only you can give in the resurrection. We pray for your guiding and healing hand for your servant Jean as she's about to undergo eye surgery. Give her a peace as she goes forward toward that. Give her a confidence in the skills you have granted to the doctors and nurses and all the medical teams that will care for her. Give her a quick recovery and success in that procedure. Lord, watch over Kathy Fargo as well as she'll undergo surgery next week. Lord, give us your Holy Spirit today as we study your word, the account of your servant Ruth, and Boaz, and Naomi, and they were part of your plan for the bringing about of the Savior that you had promised to Adam and Eve, and that you have fulfilled in your Son Jesus, and you bring to us even here in our day. These things we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so the book of Ruth, and is really a wonderful. It's a wonderful book. It is. It's terrific. It's, I think, one of the most genuine love stories that we have in the scriptures between Ruth and Boaz. I think it's when we get to chapter 3 there and see sort of chapters 2 and 3 with Ruth and Boaz sort of flirting with each other in a very sort of Old Testament kind of way, and it's really funny. And an important theme to keep through this is Boaz is referred to again and again as a redeemer. And the immediate context of that is that he was one who could marry his relative's wife, widow, and provide for her and establish a household for his relative through his relative's wife and through his family then. So that's the concept of a kinsman redeemer. But when we hear redeemer, it's also the language of savior, and that we get with in reference to Jesus. And so as we read the book of Ruth, I'd like you to be aware of and watching and listening for those different words and situations and the ways that Boaz is depicted and recorded, and how he is a foreshadowing of Christ and his love for his bride, the church, the Redeemer. That in a way Boaz embodies the Redeemer for Ruth, but also foreshadows the Redeemer of who is Jesus. Because it's definitely there. The book of Ruth takes place sometime during the cycle of Judges. So the Judges are operating in Israel at this time. We don't have reference to a specific judge, but nevertheless, the judges are the ones at work. So this is sort of back in time a little bit into the book of Judges, somewhere in there. We know it's not too terribly long to the end of the cycle of Judges. There's only a couple generations after Ruth that we get to Jesse and then to David. And in fact, we have, let's see, sit here.
They didn't,
Yeah,
they
so-
didn't call Ruth the judge?
No, Ruth, no. So Boaz took Ruth, she became his wife, and so Ruth and Ruth had Obed, and Obed had Jesse, and Jesse had David. So great-grandparents. That's close. I mean, my kids know their great-grandparents, which I'm very thankful for before they passed away. They knew them for a significant number of years. So, I mean, it's possible David knew Ruth and Boaz personally. And this is where we get that Jesus was born in the town of Bethlehem, because Ruth and Boaz were from Bethlehem. And that's where the lineage of David came through Bethlehem at that time. So that's an important thing there. So yeah, pretty close connections there.
So I have a question,
Mhm.
before we get started, as far as what you're saying at the very beginning, that Boaz was the redeemer, that marriage thing.
Right.
Now, is it required of them to become, is it just a must? Or do they have to be asked to be the redeemer of the family, of the widow?
That's a good question. I think there is sort of an obligation to do it. And it's in some respects how we get some multiple wife situations where, but at the same time, they may take them as a wife, but not necessarily as to consummate the marriage in a sexual way either. But sometimes definitely in that respect as well, that they would carry on their brother's family on his behalf was kind of the idea there. So, but I think there's definitely sort of, if there was an obligation to it, or if you passed on it, then sort of the next one in line, and we're going to get that with Boaz, there's somebody closer to the situation who would have maybe first dibs, and he passes on it, and they have to make an arrangement so that he is passing that on to Boaz, so Boaz can take that responsibility.
So, this families probably lived together, like in the same neighborhood, general area and stuff. So I could see that happening where, like, my sister or my brother would be living down the road from me. I'd make sure that they had enough to eat, or, stuff like that.
Yeah, the interconnectedness of community and the importance of that within family is definitely part of Middle Eastern culture, but we see that in the Old Testament as well, is that the others would be cared for by family first and foremost, and then the community. No one should be left destitute like that.
It's nice that they did that.
Yeah.
Wish
yeah.
we did it now.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think and that's even St. Paul's encouragement in some of his letters. It's like, make sure you take care of those of the household of faith. It would be a shameful thing for a church to turn their back on one of their own members. It's shameful enough when a family does it, let alone the church then do it also, and that we should always be the ones to step up for that. And then, families and churches and those communities doing it voluntarily is always able to do it better than by the constraint of law and government. And for all we can say about social safety nets and government programs and all these sorts of things, the more we can encourage it to be done voluntarily through private organizations and churches and things, the more efficient, the more thorough, and the more successful it always is. And that's why churches were the ones who started orphanages and hospitals and all these things. It's because the church cared for the widows and the fatherless, and the sick and the destitute, minister to those in prison and things. I mean, that's the church has done more, Christianity has done more for the downtrodden than any other ideology. And to focus on the misuse of the things done wrongly in the name of Christ, as though that somehow, we can acknowledge that there were evils done in the name of Christ, but they are against and antithetical to the faith itself. It's not consistent with the faith to act in those atrocities. It's inconsistent with the faith, and they're rejected. And what is embodied in the faith is the care and generosity and self-sacrificing of Christianity toward the world, toward their neighbors, even if they're not Christians. So, yeah. So in the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a man of Bethlehem in Judah went to sojourn in the country of Moab. The Moabites are always a problem. The Moabites go back to Lot and his two daughters, and the Moabites are constantly a thorn in the side of the Israelites when they were coming up the first time toward the Promised Land. There was that crossing over of the Moabite daughters to the sons of Israel, the one that got pierced through into the tent while they were consummating the marriage. That was a Moabite. The Moabites are a problem. And so to know how severe the famine is, that they would go and sojourn, which means to go and live with the idea of it being temporary in the land of Moab. He brought his wife and his two sons. So the man's name was Elimelech, the name of his wife Naomi, and the name of his two sons were Malon and Chilion. Which you think at this point we would not get somebody's name. It's like Samson's mom's name or Mrs. Noah. It's like we usually just get these names left out, but we get everybody's name. We get Elimelech, the sons, and Naomi, and we get everybody's names. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem in Judah. So you've got the tribe is Judah. The clan, or the next level was they were from Ephrathah, and in that county they were in the city of Bethlehem, and so that's this is their credentials, their family tree of sorts. And they went to the country of Moab and remained there. But Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, died, and she was left with her two sons. And these took Moabite wives. The name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other, Ruth. They lived there about 10 years, and both Malon and Chilion died, so that the woman was left without her two sons and her husband. So you have a famine, you have a child of Israel, an Israelite family go out with everything, family and all these things, and while they're out, they lose everything. They go to escape the famine, and they run headlong into death. It's sort of tragic. It's sort of a tragic start to all this. Now you've got a woman and her two Gentile wives, daughters-in-law, now sort of left, what do we do now? What next? And so they're there. They've been there 10 years. This is a long famine. And one of the commentators noted that this is sort of the third Bethlehem story we've had recently. If you're going right from Judges into this, remember the Levite priest who sold himself out and stuff was from Bethlehem, and then at the end of Judges. Well, we get the story at the end of Judges, but it's likely that last story was earlier in the timeline of the Judges, because it was as close as Aaron's grandson or something was the priest or whatever. That the woman that other Levite took as a wife, confused and got her chopped up in the war and with the Danites and everything. She was from Bethlehem also. So we get kind of two terrible stories about Bethlehem, but now we have a sort of a glimmer of hope for Bethlehem in the story as well. So they've been there 10 years. So that I would say that would, as far as age goes, that puts Orpah and Ruth in their 20s, late 20s somewhere, mid 20s, 10 years, 15, 16 years old. Maybe they got married. So 25, younger than 30. So still childbearing age, all these kinds of things. So Naomi, she arose with her daughters-in-law to return from the country of Moab, for she had heard in the fields of Moab that the Lord had visited his people and given them food. So she's like, oh, the famine is now over. We can return back to Bethlehem and go back to our household, because I've got a better chance of hospitality and being cared for among my own people than among the foreigners of Moab. Anybody know the name of what the name of the town Bethlehem means? Bethlehem? You got it, Gene. House of bread. So Beth means house, and Lahem is bread. So it's the bread basket. So the fact that people from Bethlehem during a time of famine moved out shows you that there was nothing. Think Dust Bowl, the bread basket of the United States, when Kansas and everybody, there was no, everybody moved out of it, and that's how severe the famine was. So she had heard that the Lord had visited his people and given them food, so she set out from the place where she was with her two daughters-in-law. They went on their way to return to the land of Judah. But Naomi said to her two daughters-in-law, so either they're on their way or they get somewhere, and she kind of stops and says, hold on. Go, return each of you to her mother's house, and may the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me, as in reference to her husband and her sons. They were good daughters and good wives, and they've been good, and so she gives them the blessing that they would do well also. The Lord grant that you may find rest, each of you in the house of her husband. So I hope you get married again and have abundant life. Then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voices and wept. But they protest. Sometimes this next section shows up in weddings. Yeah, it's a little strange, unless you're talking about your mother-in-law. It's a little bit, if the daughter wants to make a reference to her mother-in-law with these words, then I guess that's something, but it's a little strange to go. It's a nice dedication of, a sort of loyalty and things, but so Orpah and Ruth, they say to her, no, we will return with you to your people. But Naomi said, turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Have I yet sons in my womb that they may become your husbands? It's like, look, that would be the most direct kinsman redeemer, would be their husband's brothers. But there are none. So she's like, what, am I supposed to have children and then give you husbands? Turn back, go your way. I'm too old to have a husband. And if I should say I have hope, even if I should have a husband this night and should bear sons, would you wait until they were grown? It's like, look, even if I got pregnant, got married and got pregnant with twins tonight, would you wait 18 years, 16 years till they were mature to have, then you'd be past childbearing age. That wouldn't make sense. Will you therefore refrain from marrying? What, are you just going to not get married at all? No, my daughters. For it is exceedingly bitter to me for your sake that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me. So she's definitely seeing, a hardness and suffering of her life. My husband died, my kids died, and that the Lord has afflicted, granted affliction, but I mean, it's more direct than that. To allow has caused these things to happen and given me this bitter life. It's a hard life that she's had now. I don't want to hand that on to you. I'll endure this bitterness, but you should go and have sweetness. The word there for bitter is the same one back in Exodus as they're coming out, and there were the bitter waters that were turned sweet, and they called the place Meribah, the bitter waters. Merah means bitterness. To put your teeth on edge, kind of thing, So there's this bitterness, and I don't want to pass that on to you. They lifted up their voices and wept again, and Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. It's that clinginess of a oneness of family. A man shall leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife. There's this holdingness, this connection between the two that says, no, we're family. I can't let you go.
It tells us about Naomi, doesn't it?
That she was a good mom. She had a good relationship with her daughters-in-law. Yeah. Naomi said, "See, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law." So Orpah's going back, and I mean she's sorry to leave and things like that, and so be it. And I don't necessarily begrudge Orpah any of that. It's like, yeah, it makes more sense for her to go back to her people, and would like to kind of not gone back to her gods, of course, but we sort of get that. But Ruth said, "Do not urge me to leave you or to return from following." So here's the wedding verses. So this is the mother-in-law telling her mother-in-law telling the daughter-in-law after her husband has died, her son has died, the daughter-in-law's husband has died, that I'll stay with you. It's like, so if that's what the daughter-in-law wants to commit to the mother-in-law at the wedding and say, look, if this guy dies, mom-in-law, I'm going to stick with you. I don't think that's the intention of why it's being put in there. I think it wants to show the closeness of the husband and wife there, but that's not the... And honestly, using the story of Ruth and Boaz later on has some innuendo that I don't necessarily think you necessarily want to put in the wedding service necessarily either, so I don't know. But Ruth says, "For where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. May the Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts me from you." So it sounds like what we've made our wedding vows to be: in sickness and in health, richer for poorer, sick, death do us part. For as long as we both shall live. When Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more. She's like, all right, you're determined to do this, then so be it. And I'm sure she was glad for it too. I mean, she loved her daughters. I mean, she seemed like she would have been glad to have them with her. But she wanted what was best for them. And she thought what was best, just go back to be among your people, get married, have a family, be glad. And Ruth was like, I'm going to stay with you. You're And all the while, God is working this for something greater. So the two of them went on until they came to Bethlehem, and when they came to Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. It was like 10 years now they've been gone. And the women said, "Is this Naomi?" You can imagine a small town, they get back into town and things, and it's like, hey, did you hear Naomi's back? Oh, is Naomi back? Oh, wow, Naomi's back. Where's her husband? Where are the sons? And who's this lady with her? And they're the talk of the town is basically what it's saying there. And she said, "Do not call me Naomi, call me Marah, for the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. I went away full, and the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi when the Lord has testified against me and the Almighty has brought calamity upon me? So she hasn't rejected God. She's accepting what God has done in her life, and it's brought her back to her people and has set up, to bring Ruth back into the community there and things like that. So, I mean, she's sort of accepting that what God ordains is always good, even though it's bitter. It's still the will of God, and so perhaps he means some blessing through all this. And that's the perspective of faith, to acknowledge that the Lord has dealt me a bitter hand, and it's bitter, and it's sorrowful, and it's been hard. But what God ordains is good, and so I receive it. And God means this for a blessing for me, and so it is. That takes faith, and it is faith. So I think that's a good perspective for us to have as Christians when we see our times of bitterness, is to say, the Lord has brought this calamity upon us. Blessed be the name of the Lord. What did Job say? The Lord gives, the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Not curse the name of the Lord, but blessed be the name of the Lord.
I still have a question.
Yes, please.
Is there does Naomi have any special meaning?
Good question. I don't know that answer.
Google.
Huh?
It says literally pleasant.
Pleasant? Okay, so the Hebrew word behind Naomi means pleasant or pleasantness. So see the contrast. Don't call me pleasant, call me bitter.
Is that what Mara means?
Yeah, Marah means bitterness. Yep. Yep. Thank you. It's in a footnote there. Excellent. Yeah, I would say most of the time the names mean things. I wish I had a better collection of when they said, no longer will you be called this, but you'll be called that. I think there's one place where no longer will you be called barren, but you will be called Beulah. Beautiful. And if you translate it directly into the names, it's like no longer will you be called this, but you'll be called Beulah. But if you translate it, you no longer will be called that, but you'll be called beautiful or abundant and things. And it's like, yeah, but there's a name behind that. People, so I think it'd be cool to have. So I need to find that resource, I guess. So Naomi returned and Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, with her, who returned from the country of Moab, and they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. So this is springtime. It is around the festival of Pentecost. It's about 50 days after Passover-ish is when the barley harvest would begin to come in. Pentecost was the barley harvest festival, and so it's I think that's the early harvest. So that's the sort of our setup there. Now Naomi had a relative of her husband's, a worthy man of the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. So family connection's already there. Jews reading this at that point would have suddenly said, "Oh, that's important. That means there could be a connection there, because Boaz could take Ruth, his kinsman redeemer stuff. That would have been their clue as to why that connection's there. A worthy man just means he's well respected, or he's a man who is something. He's part of the community. He's not just anybody, but maybe has land and property and wealth and things, but also respect and standing in the community. He's well thought of in the community. Yeah.
Why didn't Naomi go back? Why do you think? I know you don't know. Why didn't she go back to her own family?
It's possible we don't have anybody else there at that time. Remember, they'd just gone through a famine.
Oh, that's true too.
A lot of people died.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this could be the closest. Well, there's one closer than Boaz. We know that. But Boaz is otherwise close. So she does. Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, let me go to the field and glean among the ears of grain after him in whose sight I shall find favor. That was a way, it was part of the laws of Israel, that when you cleared the field, if it fell on the ground, you let it lay. You didn't harvest all the way up to the corners. You went around the corners and left those corners there, the edges there, so that the poor and the destitute could come and harvest the leftovers, pick up the dropped grain, the gleanings, and that way they could live a little bit hand to mouth. It was a way of being charitable to the community, so they could come and sort of come along behind the harvesters and pick up sort of what was left. She says, just let me go, and whoever lets me come, whoever I find favor with, whoever lets me come and glean in their field, then that's where I'll go and glean. And Naomi says, go, my daughter. So she set out and went and gleaned in the field after the reapers, and she happened to come to the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the clan of Elimelech. So the happening words there is like her chanced upon that she landed in Boaz's field. It's like, as luck would have it. And it's, one commentator was saying, it's a big wink. She happened to come to the part, she just happened to come there, huh? It's a big wink for us. It's like, know what I mean? Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
But it's interesting, it says that it was the part of the field that Boaz belonged to Boaz, so it was a huge area, and he had part of it.
Right. Yeah. So we think of parcels divided up, and we like out west we've got roads between everything and like that and stuff. Yeah, and it's possible there were huge swaths that were just open fields. They didn't necessarily subdivide them all those ways. It was easier for them to all just sort of go out together. Everybody plant at the same time. Everybody just sort of go through and harvest at the same time, but they sort of know from this area to this area, that belongs to you. This is your part. It's your part and things. Behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem, and he said to the reapers, the Lord be with you. And they answered, the Lord bless you. So, hi, how you doing? Good, how are you? And he said to his young man who was in charge of the reapers, whose young woman is this? Somebody caught his eye. He's like, who's the new girl?
Ooh la la.
Yeah. I mean, this would be a great, you could see this playing out in like one of those, not a romantic, maybe a romantic comedy, but like a romantic movie and things like that. It's like he comes in and she's out there gleaning, and the new guy, rides up and everything, and he's talking to the foreman, and you see him from a distance, you see him see her from a distance, and they, the passing glance, and just, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Boaz was used to playing the field.
Pretty good. So the foreman in charge of the reapers answered, she's the young Moabite woman who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab. So it's like, the young woman who came back that everybody's been talking about, that's her. There's a knownness in that introduction. It's like, the one that everybody's been talking about, that's her. There's the Hallmark movie. It's like, that's what it is. It's a Hallmark movie, Yeah, she's the hotshot lawyer who came back from New York because she had to deal with her dog's inheritance, or whatever. I don't know. And she said, please let me glean among the sheaves after the reapers. So she came, and she's continued from early morning till now, except for a short rest. So there's some ambiguity in the Hebrew there. It's it's like she's been here. Something about a house and till now. There's just some weird Hebrew language there. There's some sort of idiom there about working in the field. She's been working hard. She's been attentive to things. This is where she's been.
But she was after the reapers. So what they left, the crumbs they left, she gleaned those.
Correct. So she was, she's come in to just pick up the leftovers, as is our custom, to feed her and her mother.
But the reapers have already been, okay. Never mind.
Yeah, she's going in right after them.
It was,
Okay.
Snap the gun.
So Boaz says to Ruth, so he summons her and says, listen, my daughter, do not glean in another field or leave this one, but keep close to my young women. Let your eyes be on the field that they are reaping and go after them. Have I not charged the young men not to touch you? And when you are thirsty, go to the vessels and drink what these young men have drawn. So he's basically saying, don't go anywhere else. I'll take care of you. There will be enough here for you. And in fact, something about this procedure of the harvesters and picking up the gleaning and women coming afterwards and things, there seems to be some sort of danger involved. And you can sort of think about this. You've got, you have maybe rough men doing the harvesting who have worked hard and are tired and maybe are raucous at night, who may not make the best choices and things. You know, think of, I don't want to besmirch any reputations of any groups or anything, but, you know, you think dock workers, you know, things like that. It's like at night, trouble happens. And so what Boaz is saying, hey, stay close to my women so you're not out there alone. In fact, I've told my men, don't mess with you, or they're going to have to answer to me. And so he's offering this protection for her. And this is sort of him. I mean, he's certainly taken interest in her. And I think there's some flirtatiousness going on here. It's like, hey, don't go anywhere else. I got you covered here. And in fact, you know, you can pick up the gleanings. That's great. In fact, if you get thirsty, just help yourself to the water. That was not part of the deal. That's extra. And even just granting her protection from his workers and just, you know, my guys are going to watch out for you. My ladies, you can hang out with them. That means they're going to take care of you. And I think that involves, you know, food and helping with the work and some of those kinds of things too. So there's some hospitality going on here. And I think it's more than just because they're family. I think that's he's showing extra interest in her. So he grants her all these sort of gifts in this, and then verse 10, then she fell on her face, bowing to the ground, and said to him, why have I found favor in your eyes that you should take notice of me since I'm a foreigner? It's like, so I mean, she really does, I mean, she's showing respect, you know, by sort of taking a knee in front of him and, you know, sort of being humble about it. And Boaz answered, all that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told to me. So I know your story. How you left your father and mother in your native land and came to a people you did not know before. The Lord repay you for what you have done, and a full reward be given you by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. You give her this beautiful blessing and say, look, you've done the right thing, and I just want to acknowledge that, and I think you deserve this, because you're a pretty nice girl. Verse 13, then she said, I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord, for you have comforted me and spoken kindly to your servant, though I am not one of your servants. It's like, you know, thank you. You've done something above and beyond. I see that. You know, I don't deserve this, but you've done this graciously. All right. Redeemer. Redeemer language. You know, he provides for her, gives her above and beyond, protects her, and does these things for her, not because she's deserved them, but because he desires to give them to her as a reward, if you will, but out of his graciousness. And what does he do? He even invites her to his table. At the mealtime, Boaz said to her, come here and eat some bread and dip your morsel in the wine. So he even invites her to his table. The wine word there, does anybody have anything other than wine? Dip your bread in the wine.
Mine just says wine vinegar.
Wine vinegar, okay. That's a little bit of a clue. So there's some sort of beverage here that, you know, that hospitality says, you know, hey, you know, come eat some bread, share in this wine thing that we have. It's think of, like the olive oil and, and things that, when you go to a restaurant, you got your dipping sauce, or there's something about it that there's something common in that area about, hey, when you come and eat, you're gonna have this other thing there, this wine dipping sauce, condiment, meal sort of thing there, and whatever. It's a bitter wine, and it's this word is mentioned in the things that a Nazarene can't consume, so it's somehow alcoholic or connected to being made from grapes. And if you make anything with grapes, anything with sugar in it, it's going to ferment, so there's going to be alcohol in it. There's some bitterness aspect to it. So, I mean, when you think of, sort of mealtime sort of stuff, bitter things can be tasty as well. Sour things, they're sweet, sour, bitter. These are kind of good things. It's also related to the word of the wine vinegar offered to Jesus on the cross. So whether that means it has some myrrh mixed into it, and there's some medicinal aspect to it and things, I just think of this is the table is set with things for the time of harvest, and they're working hard all day, and they come and then they've got the things to eat and drink at night, and that are just common for the harvest time. And I think most communities or most countries and things have these sort of common foodstuffs that everybody in that area knows about and can sort of refer to shorthand, and other places in the world or in the country or things may not know anything about them. It's like you go down to Texas and you order barbecue, you're going to get a piece of white bread, a pickle, and on that table will be raw sliced white onions. It's going to happen. It's going to be there. And if it's not, it's a chain. It's a franchise. That's just what it is. And I think beverages and things like that. Has anybody ever heard of horchata? It's a Mexican rice milk.
It's a white liquor.
It's a white. It doesn't have to necessarily be alcoholic. It's a rice, water, milk, cinnamon, vanilla-y sort of beverage. It's good cold. It's South American. It's very refreshing. It's one of those things that everybody down there knows, and everybody would have at, it's like, what do you want to have a glass of, that's sort of a treat after a long day. Like, tall glass of lemonade or sweet tea, horchata, whatever this wine vinegar stuff is. There's all that sort of commonly understood kind of stuff that would have just been there. And that's what I think this is in reference to. But I think it's a neat reference to that whatever this is, it's whatever the same stuff is they offer Jesus on the cross. The Greek word translates exactly over. It's a little bit ambiguous in Hebrew as to wine, vinegar, what this is, but there's sort of this sour sort of hard work related, refreshing, beveragey, condiment food stuff sort of thing. It's like cold beer on a hot day. Kind of refreshing sort of food stuff. I just think it's neat that there's that connection to, they had this there at the cross because Israelites, they're suffering. They give them this as sort of to pacify, it's sort of like, oh, something familiar. Maybe there's a medicinal aspect to it. It's sort of a, I don't know, mercy sort of thing there to give them this beverage on the cross while they're dying. I mean, it is what it is. Last sort of just give you something that is familiar and can give you a minute to just die in peace. I don't know. But there's a connection there. So he invites her to his table. There's another Redeemer aspect. What does Jesus do for us? He sets his table and brings us in, invites us to his table. So she sat beside the reapers, and he passed to her roasted grain. I think that is sort of a, that's a harvest time food stuff sort of thing. It's like, hey, we harvest grain all day, and we just take some of the kernels and we roast them, and that's what we eat on, corn nuts. that's just one of the things they ate that day because we got a ton of this stuff, and it's one of those tasty treats we do. It's like when you make, whenever my mom would make pie crusts, and then she'd trim the edges, she'd put that on and little butter, cinnamon, and sugar, and that's what we had. So I think that's sort of that connection. It's like, hey, we got all this grain, we're going to roast a little bit up, and we're going to enjoy it.
Pastor, we call them pie crust twist, and it was with salt.
With salt.
So you take it, and you twist it, and
Oh.
you bake it, and you put some salt. It's really interesting.
That sounds good.
I like yours better though.
Use brown sugar, it's even better.
We don't waste anything.
And she ate until she was satisfied, and she had some left over. What does that sound like to you? It's like feeding the 5,000, right? Everybody had their fill, and they were satisfied, and there were 12 baskets left over. So she had plenty left over, and that he's going to let her take with him and with her. When she rose to glean, Boaz instructed his young men, saying, "Let her glean even among the sheaves, and do not reproach her." So let her go up to where we're stacking the stuff even. Normally you just got to stay in the open area, not where we're stacking stuff up. But let her go ahead and even go to where stuff gets stacked up, because that's where everybody kind of wants to go, because that's where most of it drops. And don't yell at her for it. Just let her do it. And also pull out some from the bundles and for her, and leave it for her to glean, and do not rebuke her. So it's like, let her go to where there's abundance, but in fact, just, be a little sloppy around her. Let her. So it was his way of giving her extra, while sort of being dignified about it. It's not just like, here's 50 bushels of grain. No, I don't think she would have taken it. I think it would have been. But it was like, just let her have the extra. Make it easier on her. So she gleaned in the field until evening, and she beat out what she had gleaned, and it was about an ephah of barley. And apparently this is about 50 pounds.
Wow.
That's a lot.
That's a lot of grain.
My Bible says 3/5 of a bushel.
3/5 of a bushel. Okay.
It's a bushel.
So that's volumetric. Another thing was it was probably weighed about 40, 50 pounds and things. Versus maybe a typical gleaning day, you're talking about hand to mouth sort of stuff, a couple pounds worth maybe. And so he really turned it up for her. I think he's flirting with her.
Got ulterior motive.
Oh yeah, I think he is smitten by her, and is just like, hey, let's make sure she doesn't have to go anywhere else. I'll give her extra, so I can give her extra, and she's nearby, and I can make sure she's fed, and she's got enough water, and all this kind of stuff. So
The Lord works in mysterious ways.
yeah, right. You can see the interaction going on there. She took it up and went into the city. Her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned. She also brought out and gave her what food she had left over after being satisfied. It's like, imagine Naomi sitting there, and Ruth comes home, and it's like, hey, can I get some of your gleaning so I can make a little loaf of bread for us? And she comes in, boom. Oh, and I got dinner too. I got a doggy bag too. I get to see Naomi standing there like, you don't say, huh? Huh. Verse 19, where did you glean today? Where have you worked? Blessed be the man who took notice of you. It's like, I think Naomi, being from the land of Bethlehem, and I don't think this was a coincidence, and I think this was maybe something that they did. This was sort of a ritualistic way of courting in that area. I think Naomi looked at this and said, oh, I know what's going on here. I remember how Elimelech courted me. I remember when he gave me extra gleanings. What? What are we talking about? You know what I mean? Yeah. So, so she knows what's going on, and so she told her mother-in-law with whom she had worked and said, the man's name with whom I work today is Boaz. And Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, "May he be blessed by the Lord, whose kindness has not forsaken the living or the dead." It's like, he's cared for us and as widows. That's the living and the dead idea. Naomi also said to her, "The man is a close relative of ours, one of our redeemers." So this is the connection that says, Naomi knows that, oh yeah, this guy is one of those who could marry you and reconnect here. Ruth the Moabite, interesting that gets inserted there. Ruth the Moabite, not just Ruth. Ruth the Moabite said, "Besides, he said to me, you shall keep close by my young men until you finish my harvest." And Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, "It is good, my daughter, that you go out with his young women, lest in another field you be assaulted." So, there's something about that.
Safety in numbers.
Yeah. So she did. She kept close until the gleaning was over, and the barley and wheat harvests, and she lived with her mother-in-law. So this is several months that this maybe goes on. So you got the barley harvest, and then at the end of summer is the wheat harvest then. So this is several months going on. They've got plenty of wheat now, plenty of grain now, I imagine. I mean, heck, 50 pounds on the first day was probably enough for a long time. Maybe she still went out every now and then just to, hey boys. That's batting her eyes at me. I guess you wondered what that was. All right. So now we have Naomi's plan. Because Naomi, she's been married, she's an experienced woman. I just, she's got this daughter-in-law, and it's like, let me tell you how things work around here. Let me show you. And I could just imagine back to, this is how the girls talk about it from their day, and Naomi's passing this on to Ruth now. And Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, "My daughter, should I not seek rest for you, that it may be well with you?" Just like, find rest in the house of your husbands. That's what she told Orpah and Ruth there. That's what she's getting at here now. "Is not Boaz our relative, with whose young women you were? See, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor." So they've got it's all been gathered, but now they're processing it now. This happens over a longer period of time. He's working the threshing floor tonight. "Wash therefore and anoint yourself, and put on your cloak, and go down to the threshing floor." So basically, dress yourself up, clean yourself up, perfume yourself, anoint yourself, put some, sweet smelling things on, and go down to the threshing floor tonight, but do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. But when he lies down, observe the place where he lies. Then go and uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do. And she replied, "All that you say, I will do." Let me keep going here, and then I'll go back and explain what this means. Yeah. "So she went down to the threshing floor and did just as her mother-in-law had commanded her. When Boaz had eaten and drunk, and his heart was merry, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain." So it's like, all right, hard day's work, he's eaten, he's full, he's satisfied, he's, tipsy and whatever, and it's like, time for bed. She came softly and uncovered his feet and lay down. At midnight, the man was startled and turned over, and behold, a woman lay at his feet. He said, "Who are you?" She answered, "I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer." So, a couple things. Here she says, "Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer." She calls her servant there, and his servant. Earlier she had said the same thing, but I guess the word earlier was like, I'm one of the field hands, like I'm the lowest of servants. And now they've developed a relationship and all this kind of stuff going on. I guess this word is more of like a housemaid, so she uses a more elevated word for herself in relationship to him. So she starts off with, I'm a nobody, and now it's, I could be somebody. All right. So even without the particulars of the language we're about to go over, what do you think is involved with, I mean, if you're a guy and you fall asleep and you wake up in the middle of the night and there's a woman laying next to you, there's some innuendo here. I mean, regardless of whatever words are chosen here, and there's some words that actually increase this, but, you know, a woman comes and lays down next to you in the middle of the night, there's some sexual innuendo there of things like, hey, want to get married? I mean, that's basically it. You know, like, spread your wings over me. Basically, you know, cover me up. You know, it's like, hey, I've uncovered your feet. You know, now put your blanket over me. You are a redeemer. You know, it's like, hey, you could be my husband. Be my husband. She proposes to him, basically. That's pretty bold.
What did I do to deserve this?
Yeah, I mean, he's probably laying there, kind of like, am I awake right now? am I dreaming?
He was attracted to her, so he wasn't so surprised or like so.
Well, I mean, he's surprised, but he's not disappointed. I don't think he's disappointed. All right, so back up in verse 7. She came softly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. So the uncovering his feet and lying down can also be so the word uncovered is, yes, could be just, you know, pulled those feet. But it's also the word of uncovered that is connected to nakedness. Like back in Leviticus, they're all talking about, you know, you shall not uncover the nakedness of your brother, mother, father, uncle, you know, all those different things. It's the uncovering of nakedness there that is that word. So there's more to just uncover than just, you know, his feet hung out the end of the bed. I'll get to his feet in a second. And lay down is also, you know, and like in English we have, you know, and he laid with her can mean, yeah, they laid next to each other, but also can mean he laid with her.
Just like he knew her.
Yes, exactly. So there is sexual innuendo in that word as well, that she lay next to him in a laying sort of way.
And what did he have
He
to
was
drink?
kind of leaning, you know, it's like, he was leaning toward you, you know, it's like, what does that mean? So, like I said, even without this loaded language here, he wakes up next to a woman in his bed in the middle of the night. I mean, that's a thing. But now, even how it's being described by the authors, they try to soften it a little bit by using sort of this double entendre. And that happens a lot in our translations too. If there's a suggestive way it can be translated and maybe an unsuggestive way it can be translated, even though the context would tell you that this is probably suggestive, is often not translated suggestively.
Otherwise, we have to ban the book.
Everybody talks about Song of Solomon, but what I'm about to tell you here, hang on to your horses here for a second. If you have kids in the room and you're watching this at home, just you know, be prepared to talk to them about where kids come from. Feet. Sometimes feet are feet, and sometimes feet are more than feet. It's also a euphemism for privates. Private parts, for genitalia in Hebrew. It's like a Hebrew euphemism. So on the one hand, she came and pulled the sheet over his feet and laid down next to him and just waited for him to wake up and say, hey, how you doing? In a maybe more thorough reading, she came, took his pants off, and laid down laid with him, snuggled up to him and kind of made him move on. This is realistic, isn't it? I mean, come on. Sort of courtship, young, whatever. It's realistic. And it's not that they had intercourse. I mean, that's not necessarily suggested here. But it's definitely an intimate connection that she's making her desires known, and she's being pretty forward about it. But remember, this is Naomi's idea, too. This is Naomi also saying, yeah, it's like, you want to win a man around here? Try this. uncover his feet and lay down. So just have that in mind, that there's more to this than this. And just even with the language just as it is, it's a thing, but with the loaded language in it, it's more than that. So, yeah, it definitely is, it is definitely a sort of innuendo.
In my footnotes, it says when they spread the corner of the garment over him, it was a request for marriage.
Right. So when she says,
Yeah, my footnotes.
spread your wings over, spread your wings over your servant, for you are redeemer, that is a marriage sort of thing. Basically, I want to marry you. You know, if a man spreads his wings over his betrothed, or his the one who's caught his eye, that's the proposal for marriage and things. So, and he gets it exactly what the conversation is going to go here next. It's exactly what's going on here. So, everybody talks about Song of Solomon being racy. This is pretty racy.
My footnote says, the custom was common to Israelitish society. However, no biblical sanction exists for its use today.
The spreading the wing over sort of thing, or yeah, I mean, so yeah, that's a nice way of saying it was a customary thing, but it was not a prescription of law for how to do marriage today. That's an interesting footnote, especially it seems directed toward people who look to the Old Testament to sort of figure out what are our rules for today as far as customary things, which we don't have to do the Israelite court customs, otherwise we're going to have to be gleaning a lot of grain. And make sure you're washing your feet. So sometimes it's more than feet. All right. Verse 10. And he said, "May you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. You have made this last kindness greater than the first, in that you have not gone after young men, whether poor or rich." So it's like, Boaz may not be the youngest guy around, and maybe he was expecting, like, you'd have other options, and here you've come after me. I'm flattered. And he's not disappointed.
Going back to verse 9.
Yeah.
It's interesting that he asked her who she is. I mean, he just got done doing this, like, flirting thing, and then he wakes up at this woman doing these things. Like, who else did he think it was going to be?
It's dark.
It's dark.
They're inside the threshing floor in the middle of the night. He's waking up from a wine-induced slumber. I don't think he can see her face. I don't think there's anything about her that he can recognize at that very moment. He's concerned at that very moment, like, who are you and what are you doing here? Think about it. That's the moment. It's not like she talked to him, had this conversation, then he's like, by the way, who are you? I mean, he knows it's Ruth. He knows when she identifies herself, that he's fine with it. But at first it's like, who are you? It's like you're in a dark room, just woken up out of sleep at midnight, all this kind of stuff. There's plenty of confusion to be had there. Asking her who she is, that just makes sense. Yeah, it's dark, yeah. All right, verse 11, "And now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you all that you ask. For all my fellow townsmen know that you are a worthy woman." So he says yes. "And now it is true that I am a redeemer. Yet there is a redeemer nearer than I." So it's like, yes, it's true. I'm a relative. I'm in line to do this for you. But there is somebody closer to you. Oh, by the way, the getting dressed thing earlier. When she says, her mom tells her, get dressed, and all these kinds of things. It's possible, one suggestion was that she had been wearing widow's garb. Showing that she was in mourning at that time and things. As a way of saying, I'm unavailable. But for her then to show up not in widow's garb, is and to ask him to marry her, basically, and everything else, is that's why it hadn't happened earlier, and nobody else had approached her earlier. It's possible because she had this mourning widow's garb that she had been wearing.
Was that a custom then back then?
It seems like that's, there's suggested that. So, verse 12, but there's a redeemer nearer than I. Remain tonight please don't go anywhere. And in the morning, if he will not redeem you, if he will redeem you, good, let him do it. But if he is not willing to redeem you, then as the Lord lives, I will redeem you. Lie down until the morning. So she lay at his feet until the morning, but arose before one could recognize another. So before the early lights and things, she splits so that it's not like, hey, did you see Ruth leaving Boaz's threshing floor last night? I wonder if she laid down at his feet. And he said, let it not be known that the woman came to the threshing floor. So basically it's like, to anybody, any of his servants or anybody who was with him, it's like, just keep it quiet. You see this playing out, this makes a good film.
Yeah. Well, he also, I'm assuming, didn't want it to go much farther until he checked with the other kinsmen.
Right, exactly. Yeah, they didn't want to, I mean, whatever happened, well, whatever looks like it happened, whether it happened or not, they didn't want anybody to get the impression that it happened, because it would have been out of order, or even if nothing did happen beyond that, whatever. And he said, bring the garment you're wearing, hold it out, give me your cloak. So she held it out, and he measured out 6 measures of barley and put it on her, and she went to the city. A couple of things here. You know, it could be, one, here's a gift, dowry, sort of like, hey, I don't want you to go back empty-handed. It's also, hey, why are you coming back in so late or early? It's like, I'm just carrying some barley, don't mind me. You know, worked all night. Whew. You got to have a reason to be out about that time of day. It's the kind of thing. She came to her mother-in-law, verse 16. How did you fare, my daughter? How'd it go? You see her, yeah. She told her all that the man had done for her, saying, these 6 measures of barley he gave to me, for he said to me, you must not go back empty-handed to your mother-in-law. She replied, wait, my daughter, until you learn how the matter turns out, for the man will not rest, but will settle the matter today. So she's like, he's eager about this. Let's just stay here. Let's not jump to any conclusions. Let's just see how it plays out. Let's just hang out here. We'll be all right.
Naomi's pretty savvy, huh?
She's a smart lady. So in some arrangements of the books of the Bible, Ruth falls here after Judges. Sort of historically, it makes sense. They're sort of connected in those ways. In other arrangements of it, it comes right after the book of Proverbs. What does Proverbs end with? The Proverbs 31 woman who buys a field, considers a field and buys this really great, godly, savvy, smart, successful, blessed woman is how Proverbs ends. And then we pick up with the story of Naomi and Ruth. The book is named Ruth, but who's the main player in all this is Naomi. Yeah, I mean Ruth's a great daughter, but Naomi's the Proverbs 31 woman in a lot of ways. So sometimes it's sort of a neat connection there, right? So that's kind of cool. You're right, she is very savvy. Now Boaz had gone up to the gate and sat down there, because that's where deals are made. And behold, the Redeemer of whom Boaz had spoken came by. And so he said, turn aside, friend. Come here, sit down. It's like, hey, you, come here. I got to talk to you. We're making a deal here. And he turned aside, sat down. He took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, sit down here. So they sat down. It's like, what's that little meeting here? And this is how they did it.
He's taking a chance. He's taking a chance.
He's going to shoot his shot here. He's going to say, all right, here's the deal. Naomi, who has come back from the Moab, is selling the parcel of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. So I thought I would tell you of it and say, buy it in the presence of those sitting here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not, tell me that I may know, for there is no one besides you to redeem it, and I come after you. Are we talking about a field? So Boaz is pretty smart too.
Do
It's
we
like
have any idea who this other redeemer is?
we don't get much more detail than that. No. It's just somebody closer than. So it could be by age. He has priority, I mean, they could be like the same level of relative, but he's the older one, so he's got first dibs kind of thing. It's another cousin, but for whatever reason, he's got first dibs. Yeah. So he's like, hey, she's selling this field. Do you want to buy the field? And he said, I will redeem it. I will buy the field. And Boaz said, the day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the widow of the dead, in order to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance. So that's part of the deal. And so it's like lawyer stuff. It's like, so do you want the field? Yep. Well, if you get the field, you also get the woman. Oh, something else to consider. Then the Redeemer said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I impair my own inheritance. Somehow him acquiring the wife to perpetuate that would have diluted his inheritance to her children in addition to his own. And he's like, no, I don't want to spread out my inheritance any more than I have already. So then he says, take my right of redemption for yourself, for I cannot redeem it. He's like, I'd like the field, but I can't take on the family, so I pass. It's in your hand now. I have the first right, you have the second right, I'm going to pass on it, now it's yours. And here's how they seal the deal. This is funny. Now this is the custom in former times in Israel concerning redeeming and exchanging. Here's how you make a transaction. To confirm a transaction, one drew off his sandal and gave it to the other. And this was the manner of attesting in Israel. So when the Redeemer said to Boaz, buy it for yourself, he drew off his sandal. Then Boaz said to the elders and all the people, you are witnesses this day that I have bought from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech and all that belonged to Chilion and to Mahlon. Also Ruth the Moabite, the widow of Mahlon, I have bought to be my wife, to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance, that the name of the dead may not be cut off from among his brothers and from the gate of his native place. You are witnesses this day. And all the people who were at the gate of the elders said, we are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel. May you act worthily in Ephrathah and be renowned in Bethlehem. And may your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, which is kind of a weird blessing. You remember who Tamar was?
Yeah.
She was the
She was the one in the wall, wasn't she?
no.
No? Okay, then I don't.
I thought she was a prostitute, didn't
She's the one that dressed up like let me get it right.
she? The brother-in-law.
Yeah. Let me get it right. Yeah. Yeah, Judah's daughter-in-law, who dressed up like a prostitute that Judah slept with and then had the baby, and it's kind of a weird blessing, just put it that way, because it's like, yeah, it may feel like the incestuous relationship.
What was the result of that relationship?
Of Tamar
and Perez?
they had the Tamar and Judah. They had the kid Perez. Yeah.
The first Latina.
Yeah. So, but it was a strong house. I mean, it's the line of the Messiah. I mean, we know that coming up, but because the offspring that the Lord will give you by this womb. So, I mean, they offer him a blessing. You know, Rachel and Leah and these things. So it's like, you know, have a good blessing. So the handing off of the shoe is like, you know, it was the way of saying, yep, what is mine I'm giving to you. Like I think it has to do with the idea of where my sandals have tread, I now give you the right to tread on that land as well. That kind of idea, maybe that's part of it. But it comes as a package deal, so I get the land that Naomi had that would have been to her sons, but they died. So now I take Ruth, and I take his land and everything that becomes mine, and I will perpetuate that lineage as their redeemer. And they say, yep, it's legit. You witness it, it's all above board. This is firm and attested to. It's not shady, it's not illegal. This is all above board, yes. And thus it's so.
So the guy had to go buy another pair of sandals.
Yeah, right. There's some suggestion that they would exchange sandals, like he would give him one and then they would give the other one back, but that's not necessarily the case. But yeah.
Get the shoemakers in business.
Yeah, right. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. And he went into her, and the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. Then the women said to Naomi, "Blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without a redeemer, and may his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you is more to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him." Then Naomi took the child and laid him on her lap and became his nurse. And the women of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, "A son has been born to Naomi." They named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. So basically, Naomi helped raise, was in the household, helped raise Obed, and it's a good close family relationship and stuff. So that's a beautiful story. And then here are the generations of Perez. So maybe that's part of the, that's probably part of the blessing. May your household be like that of Perez to Tamar and Judah, because that's their lineage. That's probably it. So Perez fathered Hezron, Ram, Aminadab, Nashon, Salmon, Boaz, Obed, Jesse, David. So this is obviously written probably by Samuel after David's become king, since really a big part of the reason this story is included is because it's part of the royal lineage. I don't think anybody really would have written it down before David became David. That idea, because David was a nobody. He was the least of his father's house, even. He was the youngest of Jesse's kids, and Samuel comes and is like checking out all the sons of Jesse, and he's like, "No, God doesn't want any of these. You got any other sons?" And he's like, "I got the youngest one. He's out tending the sheep. You want him?" He's like, "Yep, we're going to wait here for him."
Yes, but he killed Goliath.
He killed Goliath, and we'll start getting into some of those things. We went through the whole book in one day. How did we do that? It's kind of
4 chapters.
That's a great story.
But it was a great
It's really a wonderful, I think it's a lovely account. I think it's neat to have some surprising things that you learn, as you're reading these stories. I think the foot thing is I think it's interesting. Just keep that in mind as you read scripture sometimes, that if there's sort of if there's something that strikes you and sort of says, is there more to it than that? There probably is. There's probably more to it than that. That's okay. Which is kind of neat. So you see God being faithful, even during the time of the judges, which is a rough time, and a time of faithlessness, you have some faithfulness going on here. That Boaz was a stand-up guy. He did things in the right way, and he took care of them, and wanted to do things above board. He didn't just say, "Oh, you got this other redeemer, I'll go kill him." It's like that's sort of what you would expect to have happen or something, right? It's like, and he lied in wait and then, strangled him with a sheaf of wheat, or something weird like that would have happened. But it all just sort of happened in a very normal and God-pleasing direction of things. What is particularly interesting about Ruth marrying in? Who was she? Moabite. Gentile. Yeah. So in the lineage of the greatest king in Israel's history, his great-grandmother was a Moabite. In the lineage of the Messiah, of Jesus, you have those outside of Israel grafted into the family tree. And so I think that exemplifies this idea that by faith and by God's will, all people, salvation is for all people. It's for all mankind. It isn't just for Israel. It isn't just for the tribe of Judah. It is for all people. And that's part of the argument that the book of Hebrews and Paul make, is that, look, from the beginning, God has always brought in those outside of the nation of Israel and brought them in by faith. By faith, we are children of Abraham. And that's Ruth's case, and that's part of the lineage there, which is beautiful. So, that means we belong there too.
Yep, absolutely.
Terrific.
That's the nice thing about it. And you don't ever think about it, you know?
Yep. All right, so next week. Yes, we'll have class. I need to leave a little early. So just want to let you know that. So yes, we'll have class, but I need to leave a little early. So we'll finish at like 11 next week.
Okay.
10 to 11. So and we'll see you then.
What are we gonna do?
Are we gonna break for summer then? You mentioned, think about it.